So we invite those that are outside to come in. Okay, did you enjoy the workshops? Yeah, did you have a dialogue, conversation? Great. Did you listen? Yes, that's even better. Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing, for having selected one of the workshops and the panels, and for having exchanged and reflected. And I'm sure that you will continue thinking at the end of the day as well. And you will have taken many ideas and many feelings.
Hola. Bueno, buenas tardes a todas y a
Hello.
todos. Les agradecemos mucho que
We
estén aquí
thank you
presentes
so
en
much
una
for being
jornada
here
larga, muy
after a
intensa,
very
como la
long
última
and
actividad de la
busy
tarde.
day. This is the final activity of the
Una
day.
actividad
This
sumamente
is
importante e
a
interesante
very
porque
important
contiene
and
la
interesting
producción de
activity
conocimiento
because
que
it
CLAYSS viene desarrollando estos
shares
últimos
all the
años,
knowledge that
para lo cual
CLAYSS
vamos
has
a
been
escuchar a 5
accumulated
profesionales
in these years. So we're
de
going to listen
lujo,
to
compañeros
5
con los cuales
deluxe
me une
professionals
un gran
and
afecto
colleagues
personal y
that
una admiración
are very
profesional
dear
muy
to my
grande.
heart and
Cada
also
uno de
admire
ellos
them
forma parte
professionally.
de distintas
Each
áreas
of
de
them
CLAYSS
are
y
in
va a
different
presentar, a
areas of
compartir con
CLAYSS,
ustedes
and they're going to share
producciones
with
que tienen que
you
ver
some
con sus áreas a cada uno.
products that they have to
Producciones
do
que
with
tienen que
their
ver con
areas.
publicaciones y
These
con
products are
investigaciones
publications and
desarrolladas en estos
research
últimos años.
conducted in the
Así
past
que
few years.
contamos con la presencia
So
de
here
María
we
Rosa
have
Tapia,
María Rosa
de Luz
Tapia,
Abruj,
Luz
de Elena
Abruj,
Massad,
Elena
de
Massad,
Marianela
Marianela
Fernández
Fernández
Villa
Villa, and
Vamos a
Pablo
comenzar
Buján.
este
We are going to
panel con
start
la
this
presentación
panel
de Elena
with
Massad,
the presentation
quien
by
va
Elena
a
Massad.
presentar y
She's
acompañar
going
las
to
20
present
historias
the
de educación
20
y
stories
solidaridad.
of education and
Elena Massad
solidarity.
se graduó como
She
profesora en letras por la
graduated
Universidad de
in
Buenos Aires.
literature at the
Se
University of
desempeñó
Buenos
como
Aires.
docente en
She
instituciones de
was a
educación secundaria
teacher
y
at
superior,
secondary
en cátedras de
and
lengua,
higher
literatura y
education in
comunicación.
language, literature, and
También trabajó varios
communication.
años
She
como
also worked for
editora
many
en
years
una revista
as
en
a
Argentina
publisher in
y haciendo
different
consultoría
publications in Argentina and as
Perú
a
y Ecuador.
consultant in Peru
Fue
and
miembro de
Ecuador.
la red de
She
publicaciones
was a
del
member of
Programa
the area of
Nacional de
publications
Educación
of the
Solidaria
National
del Ministerio de
Program
Educación de
of
la Nación Argentina
Service
y
Learning in the
posteriormente en
Ministry of
2005
Education,
se
and then
unió
in
al área de
2005 she
publicaciones de
joined the
CLAYSS.
area of
Desde
publications at
ambas
CLAYSS.
posiciones actuó como
In
editora y
both
redactora
positions,
de
she acted as
textos
the
de experiencias
editor
exitosas de aprendizaje servicio
texts
solidario,
on
que en
successful
febrero
service
de
learning
2020 y
stories. In
diciembre de
February
2021
2020 and December
representó a
2021,
CLAYSS
she
en
represented
Perú como
CLAYSS in
responsable de
Peru
las acciones
as
de difusión
responsible
de la
for the
licencia de
dissemination
profesionales
actions
profesionales.
for service learning in that
Elena,
country.
la palabra es
Elena,
tuya.
the floor is yours.
Buenas tardes a todas y
Hello.
todos. Voy a aprovechar
I'm
el
going
cambio
to
de último
use
momento
this
en el
opportunity,
orden.
and as there has been a last minute
Soy la
change in the
primera,
order, as I'm the
voy a
first one,
decir
I'm
que
going to
el
say
libro
that
de
the
los
book
cinco que están representados en este
of the
momento
5 books
mi
that
libro
are going to be
es el
presented
más
today,
lindo.
mine is the prettiest of all.
Estoy segura.
I'm sure of that.
Ahora les voy a explicar
And now I'm
por qué.
going to explain
Este
why.
es uno de los modos que
This book
eligió
is one of
CLAYSS
the
para
ways that
celebrar
CLAYSS selected to
sus
celebrate
20
its
años.
20
Por
years.
eso
And that
empieza
is
con un
why
primer
it
capítulo
starts
de
with
la
our
historia
first
de
chapter, that is
CLAYSS,
the
y
history
otros
of
20
CLAYSS,
capítulos
and
que son,
then
no
there are
son
20
20
chapters
historias,
that are not 20 stories exactly, but they focus on 20 institutions that do service learning experiences, quality service learning experience. Some are experiences, in some other cases there are several experiences. They're all beautiful stories that I was fortunate to write about. So this beautiful book with beautiful stories is also beautiful because it has illustrations. It has been illustrated
que por la
by
cátedra de lenguaje
the
visual
chair
3 de la
of
Universidad
Visual
Nacional de La
Language
Plata,
3 at the University of La Plata. A round of applause for them.
si estuviéramos en
If
el Martín
we
Fierro,
were
diríamos
at
que el
the
sector
Academy
CLAYSS o no sé dónde
Awards,
están,
the
pero bueno, allá
light
están,
would
allá
be
están.
illuminating the winners
Muy
right
bien.
now. The spotlight would be there.
La cátedra que lleva adelante desde
This
2008
subject has been conducted since 2008, an experience
va a hablar seguramente Pablo en profundidad.
that's called
Libros ilustrados.
Illustrated Solidarity Books.
Libros que pasa, yo les voy a decir
So, very
brevemente.
briefly, I
En
tell you
2008
about it.
llevan
Since
adelante
2008, they've been
en la
conducting an experience where the students illustrate books intended for organizations that work with vulnerable children.
tenían
And
ilustrados hasta el momento que los entrevisté.
until I interviewed them, they had illustrated 5,020 books. Now they've illustrated 5,021 because each of the 20 people that are members of this chair focused on one institution and they illustrated the cover of each chapter. We can see that in the PowerPoint that we can see behind us. And they're beautiful, as you can see. So as you imagine, choosing or creating the table of contents for this publication was very difficult. Fortunately, I didn't have to do it, but the board of CLAYSS, because in this moment of service learning now, there are many service learning quality experiences, and unavoidably many beautiful experiences are left outside. As I was saying, the initial objective is to celebrate the anniversary, right? And it has other objectives related to it, as usually happens in CLAYSS experience books. The first one would be collaborate in making visible those experiences. That's always hard. And saying once again that service learning is a pedagogy that can be applied at every education level, at every age, any socioeconomic level, any geography, any level of at any sea level, because we have experiences in Montevideo, in the high mountains of Argentina, in the north. So there's no level that can be left outside service learning. Actually, in the book, out of these 20 experiences, there are 7 from Latin America, 13 from Argentina, 8 are from universities, 1 tertiary institution, 2 schools, elementary schools, 2 secondary school. Secondary school includes 1 school in a prison. Then there are quasi-religious institutions, state or public, private, then institutions like universities in large cities and also from rural areas, from small towns, middle-sized cities, and also in hyperpopulated cities and vulnerable settlements. And finally, from this wide range of institutions that we show in the book, we want to encourage the readers to buy a ticket in this, a single ticket to service learning. And for that, we think, and I want to use this opportunity to thank those that I overwhelmed with my requests for 4 months over WhatsApp, by email, phone calls, asking for pictures, for texts, for interviews, all the things I asked for the book. And mainly their word, because we believe that the direct word, being able to talk to the protagonists of these experiences, is the best way to connect with the public and to convince them that they can make an experience like this. Okay, as it is
decir todo lo que a veces
impossible
nos
to say
gustaría
all the
decir,
things I
porque
would
es
like to say in these
mucha hablar
very
sobre el
short
curso
10 minutes. This must have
acá
been
de
his
Kiki
idea,
Ochoa, de
Kiki
10 minutos
Ochoa's
para cada
idea, 10
uno,
minutes
bueno,
per
es
book. Well, that's
imposible. Yo voy a
impossible.
decir cosas
So I'm going
totalmente
to say
random,
absolutely random things here
que tienen que ver con
that
el
have to do
impacto,
with the
con,
impact,
con lo que quizás más
with
me
what
impresionó
I was most amazed at
sobre el
about
impacto
the
que produce
impact
la práctica de aprendizaje
produced
servicio
by
en
the
las
service learning
personas
practice
en
on
quienes lo
the
practican, en los
individuals that
estudiantes,
practice it, that is, the
en las
students, the
instituciones y en los
institutions,
docentes.
and the teachers.
Miren,
The
la primera experiencia
first
narrada
experience that is shared in the book
empieza
starts
con la siguiente cita, que
with the
dice así:
following quote.
celebro
I
una
celebrate,
exalumna,
this is a
celebro que la
former
escuela
student,
de
I
Ramona
celebrate that
esté en este
Ramona's
libro
school is
porque es
included
una
in this
escuela que
book
te
because it's a
forma para
school
sentirte
that
interpelada por lo que pasa a tu
prepares you to
alrededor
be challenged
y
by
te
what
da
happens
espacio
around
para
you
hacer
and
algo
gives you
en
the
este
space to
sentido.
do something in that sense.
Esto lo dice
So
Evelyn
this is
Wenner, que
said
es
by
exalumna
Evelyn
de la
Wenner.
escuela de
She's an
Ramona,
alumni
que
from Ramona's
los
school.
que venimos asistiendo a los
Those of
seminarios
us that
sabemos,
have
es
been
una escuela de
attending
Ramona,
these
es
conference, we are familiar with
una
Ramona's
localidad
school.
en el norte de Santa
Ramona
Fe,
is
que
in
es
the
la casa
north
de
of
los 1000
Santa Fe,
habitantes,
less
es
than
una escuela que
2,000
hace aprendizaje
people.
servicio
They
desde los
do
años
service learning
90,
since the
empezó con
90s.
Raquel
They
Camperi,
started with
y en el
Raquel
2000
Camperi. In the
ganó
2000, in
la
2000 they
elección,
won
elección de
a
premio
special
presidencial
award
como
and the
mejor
presidential award. Then
aprendizaje,
they
mejor
won the
premio
presidential
presidencial
award
hizo
twice,
aprendizaje servicio
and
siempre.
they always did service
Y no hay
learning.
manera de que
And
nos salgan estos estudiantes
these
formateados, como dice
students are
Evelyn,
formatted, as Evelyn says,
para sentirse
to
interpelados
feel
por lo que pasa a
challenged
su
by what
alrededor.
happens around them.
Esto mismo, esa
This
interpelación,
challenge,
uno la lee
well,
en
we
las
read that
experiencias
in
de las
the
escuelas
experiences
Capdevila en
at the
Mendoza,
Capdevila School
Estrada
in
de
Mendoza,
Metán
the
Salta,
Estrada School in Metán,
Romera
Salta,
Pozo
Romera Pozo in Tucumán.
y salieron los chicos así
The
como resorte
students came out of those schools and
hacer algo
they started
de
doing
reír de la
something,
comunidad
acting in their communities
el caso de Romera
when the
Pozo,
pandemic broke out. In the case of Romera
pandemia y
Pozo, the
epidemia
pandemic and
dengue.
also a dengue epidemic
Em,
simultaneously.
Bien, otro tema es
Another
el impacto en la
issue, well, the
institución.
impact on the institution.
En este corpus de 20
In this
instituciones
corpus
hay
of 20
tres
institutions, there are
que
three
tienen un origen
that
similar.
have a similar
La
origin.
EMEF Padre
The MF
Pecoraro de Grajaú.
Padre
Grajaú
Pecoraro
es
from Rajaú. Rajaú is
una zona
a
marginal
marginal
de
urban
la
area where 455,000 people live in Sao Paulo. This school was founded at the mother's request. They wanted a school there for their children. That was a simple request. There was no school, they wanted a school for their kids. 1,050 students attend that school. The Neuen Peumann School was also founded in the same way in 2008 in the Kimewe area, the B side of this beautiful city of Bariloche. This is a school that belongs to the Gente Nueva Association. Azucena, the director, says something that is amazing. She says, at the school we don't speak of service learning. We don't say service learning because it's the only thing we do. We don't need to call it service learning because that's the way we work. And the School of Arts at Tilcara, School 49, it was founded in the same way. It was a picket from Eugenia's mothers from the area, asking for a school because their children were not accepted, were not admitted because of behavior issues or because they had repeated the year in the city of Tilcara, they were not admitted to school. So this school was founded in 2012, and today there are no vacancies. There are so many applicants that want to join that school. The three schools do service learning. They have all won the presidential awards, two from Argentina and the Solidarity Award in Brazil. And they changed the style of the institution, they changed the place they live in, and they changed the educational community, just as in the Capitán de los Andes School in Tucumán or El Españolo in Mendoza. And finally, teachers.
pero plagado de citas
The book is
los
full of
docentes
quotes from teachers of what happens to the
muy
teachers
lindo
when
que
they
es
discover
elegir el camino de la pedagogía
what it
del
means to
servicio.
choose the path of service learning, the service learning pedagogy.
Se me ocurre
I'm
Natalia
thinking of
Yausá,
Natalia
directora
Chausá from the
de
School
la
of
Unidad
Penitentiary
Colonia,
Unit in
que
Colonia.
dice que no hay
She
manera
says that there's
de
no
dar clases
way
como
you can teach in the
tradicional
traditional way
ese tipo
to
de
that
población
kind of
escolar.
population, the inmates.
Pienso
And
en el profesor
I'm thinking of
Correa
Professor
de
Correa from
Romera
Romera
Pozo,
Pozo, who says that this changed his profile as a teacher. He was a teacher at a science fair, but clearly this is much more motivational to students. He's talking from a rural school, 400 kilometers from a road. The kids get there on foot, and the school, the high school, has only 3 classrooms. But I think that the best summary is the words of Leo Mucio, the professor from he's here, Montevideo Construction School, that says something that's funny and very concise. This kind of projects allows you to approach students from the attitudinal side. All the rest is in YouTube, and we as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena, for your presentation. Now we will continue and we will give the floor to Maria Rosa Tapia. She will present the Universidad collection, Service Learning in Catholic Higher Education. She has a degree in education. She's a designer of educational technology from San Diego State University. She's a specialist in education technology from the University of Buenos Aires. Her thesis was called Information and Communication Technologies in the Development of Service Learning Projects. She's a member of CLAYSS since 2002. She has been a coordinator of the volunteer program Paso Joven for the Americas for remote learning. She gave courses, workshops and webinars on service learning on an integration of technology for solidarity projects. She's also responsible for teacher training in social education for teachers, and she's also a teacher on learning and technology from the National University Raúl Escalabrín Ortiz in San Isidro. Thank you. After such a beautiful publication, at least I had to introduce a collection. So I will introduce a collection that we developed during Universidad program. You've already heard what this is about. This is a global program to promote service learning in higher Catholic education. And within this program, we are working with different lines of action. One focused on research and content production, another one focused on the consolidation of this global network of higher education institutions, and the third one is focused on the institutionalization of service learning in the institutions with which we have been working. When we started working with this program, it was essential for us to identify these vacancies, let's say, in terms of the spiritual component of this service learning, in particular in higher education, Catholic higher education. That is why we wanted to research so as to bridge that gap. Therefore, this Universidad collection is focused on service learning pedagogy for higher education, and these are publications that are open, plural, and not only restricted to higher education institutions, but what we seek is to find dialogue, interreligious and pluralistic dialogue. Therefore, the voices of these publications are from specialists and members of academia from across the world. We try to seek for a balance in terms of origins from the specialists, so as to ensure plurality and multiculturality, as well as an interreligious nature. For us, we are focused on promoting service learning, not only so as to reach academic excellence, but also to consolidate social commitment already embedded in higher education institutions, focused on making that a reality and making a sound theoretical structure. And we were able to introduce different publications for teachers and leaders from different institutions. And within the framework of the program, in this content production process, every year we hold an international symposium. And one of the first actions in the pandemic was a virtual symposium. That is why our first publication were the minutes of that symposium, gathering all the presentations made. That is why, since there are many authors or many participants here from that symposium, I will ask you to stand up if you participated from the first Universitate Symposium and if you collaborated with your presentations. So please, like I said, stand up. Thank you. Apart from your valuable contributions, for us, within the framework of the program, since what we want to do is achieve institutionalization, we thought that it was a good idea to consolidate the commitment of different institutional leaders from the regional nodes, and that is why we invited the deans of each one of the education institutions who are our reference, so that they could collaborate with their testimonies in this first publication. All these publications are available and can be downloaded from our webpage. I will show you later on the QR code so that you can download them on PDF or ebook formats. Since these were the minutes from the symposium, if you want to, you can access all the presentations and videos too from each one of the panel members. A second publication that we have also presented is connected to the pedagogy of service learning and the teachings of the Catholic Church. We wanted to integrate in one publication all the different points of views so as to articulate the teachings of the Catholic Church with a specific proposal to integrate service learning in Catholic institutions, but that they could also serve as an inspiration, considering their values. For example, one of the first chapters of this publication is the one by Cardinal Mario Poli, Archbishop of Buenos Aires, where he focuses on the teachings of Pope Francis connected to fraternity and the culture of encounter. We know that these are universal values that, apart from being strongly connected to the teachings of the Catholic Church, they are values that we all enjoy when they can be implemented as they are implemented when we develop service learning projects. The interesting thing about this second publication is that different voices from different authors from different regions were presented, and this
investigadores de la Universidad Juan Pablo
helped
II
us to have researchers from the University of Poland to share their personal experiences and the experience of Pope John Paul II. So those types of articles and those focused on spirituality and social responsibility in the teachings of the Church, and also in different regions such as in Africa, Northern Europe. All this is a group of reflections that help us realize how we can integrate on service learning pedagogies inspiration from the teachings of the Church. I will ask those who participated from this second publication to stand up, please. Do we have anyone from the second publication? Thank you, Andres. He was the coordinator of the publication, and Mariano Garcia also. They are from the CLAYSS team, and many others who, since they live in other regions, cannot attend. What we are also celebrating today is that we finally were able to present the third publication of this collection connected to spirituality and higher education, including service learning perspectives. Like I said earlier, this is a fundamental pillar in our program in order to deepen spirituality within the framework of service learning experiences. That is why we wanted to work at different levels: institutional spirituality based on the institutional mission in universities, Catholic universities, as also so as to know how this spirituality is manifested. That is why we had to get together a group of university deans to get to know their voices, because they know the spirituality and they can also share how they can implement it in order to promote service learning to make this come true. We also considered important to deepen on spirituality in higher education so as to promote student leadership, genuine and committed leadership. What this implies, what being committed with others implied, so as to make this encounter come true. And by means of these reflections, we wanted to analyze the impact on alumni and on their professional development. A third level includes focusing on spirituality and the ethics of care and fraternity, and how spirituality expresses itself in multicultural and polyethnic contexts. We wanted to contribute to the development of spirituality. Now I would like to ask the authors of the third book to stand up, because I know there are several authors here. Please stand up. As you know, this collection has 3 books published, and there are others that are being printed. The next publication will be focused on the institutionalization of service learning. Higher education institutions, Catholic higher education institutions, are working on the global history on service learning. capitalizing the opportunity of working with reference from different parts of the world, and on a global handbook on service learning in higher education. All this is available on our webpage. We hope that you can download the publications. We hope that you can help us with the dissemination, because we made a great effort and we really wanted to share all this knowledge with all of you. So we hope you enjoy it. We hope you enjoy all the resources that we share on the web as a digital repository. And we hope that if you want, you can join us on the next symposium in October in Rome, where of course we will have to publish all the minutes of that symposium. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rossi. I reinforce what Rossi just mentioned about the QR codes for the publications. In your materials, you will find a page with the publications, with CLAYSS publications and their QR codes, so you can access them from there. And remember that also the web page of CLAYSS you can also access. Now we will continue with the presentations, and we are now passing the floor to Luz Abruch.
quien nos va a
She's
presentar el
going to
relato de una
present
experiencia de
the
tejido en
story
red
of
con gestión de
an
programas de
experience
evaluación y
of a
aprendizaje
network
servicio
weaving,
en Europa
a management
Central
report
y
of
Oriental
the Service Learning
2016,
Promotion Program in Central Europe
2022.
and Eastern
Luz
Europe
Abruch es licenciada en
2016-2022.
Organización y
She
Dirección
has a degree
Institucional en
in
USAM
institutional
y
direction at the
especialista en
USAM
análisis y
and a
gestión de redes
specialist
sociales
in
en
the
la
analysis and
Universidad
management
de
of
Chile.
social networks
Sus
from
dos
the
pasiones han
Bolivarian
sido siempre
University
la
of Chile.
educación
She
y
has
el
been passionate
desarrollo
about
social.
education and social
Yo he tenido la
development,
oportunidad de
and she
trabajar
has
en
had the
ambos
opportunity
campos,
of
en
working in
escuelas y
both fields,
universidades
in
como
schools,
docente,
universities, as a
capacitadora
teacher
docente
trainer,
y con organizaciones sociales
and with
proveyendo
social
servicios de
organizations
facilitación,
providing services of
capacitación y asistencia
facilitation,
técnica,
training, and technical
así como
assistance.
desarrollando
She
materiales
also
didácticos
developed
durante los
pedagogical
últimos 20
materials
años.
during
Ha
the past
trabajado en
20
distintos
years.
lugares de
She
Argentina,
has
en
worked in
varios
several
países
places
de
in
América
Argentina,
Latina y
in
de
other
Europa
countries
del
in Latin
Este.
America
Ha
and Eastern
trabajado
Europe.
también
She
con
has
empresas
also
en
worked
negociación
with
y apoyo
companies on
conflicto.
negotiation and
Docente
conflict
a
management.
distancia
She's a
en la
remote
Universidad
teacher
Nacional
at
de
the
San
National
Martín y la
University of San
Universidad
Martin and the
Maimónides, así
Maimonides
como carrera
University,
presencial en el programa de
and
aprendizaje
also an
servicio
in-person
de la
teacher at the
Fundación
Service
Ortega y
Learning Program
Gasset,
at the Ortega y
dictando
Gasset
inglés
Foundation,
para los
where she teaches in
norteamericanos.
English for
Se
U.S.
desempeñó como
students.
coordinadora de
She was the
capacitación en
coordinator of
programas de
training,
coordinadora
and
de
currently
relaciones
she is
institucionales
coordinator of
y
institutional
redes de
affairs
aprendizaje
and
servicio
networks
comunitario en
for
CLAYSS.
service learning at CLAYSS.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Presentar una publicación
Introducing or
vinculada a la
presenting a
red
publication related to a networking process requires, I think, to start with
contarles o plantear
telling you
que yo soy la que está sentada acá,
that
pero
I'm
también
sitting
es un
here, but
proceso
actually
construido
this
entre
is a
muchos
process built by
La
several
publicación en
people.
sí,
The publication itself
llevó adelante la
was
organización nos ayudó a
organized
realizarla
or helped us
Alejandra
organize. Well, Alejandra Batista did that. She's
y lo que
somewhere over there.
y es el relato
And it's
de una
the story of an
que
experience
construimos
that
junto con
we
Candelaria
built
Ferrara,
with
que está
Candelaria
adelante,
Ferrara. She's here.
y gracias al
And
y gracias a la
thanks
experiencia
to
que
the
compartimos
experience
entre
we
otras
shared,
personas
among
con
others,
las personas de
with
los países
the
de Europa
people
Este que
from
participaron del programa. Acá
countries
veo
in
a
Eastern
Maya,
Europe. I see
Patricia,
Maya,
Silvina,
Hatice,
Florentina,
Silvina, Florentina,
está María por ahí
Maria
también,
is
de
somewhere
donde
over
muchas
there as
personas
well,
que ellos
and many other
representan
people that they
desde
represent from their organizations.
Sí.
Please stand up.
Está Maya, de
Maya,
Bosnia,
Bosnia and
Herzegovina,
Herzegovina,
de
from
Kosovo,
Kosovo,
Silvina, de
Silvina from
Transylvania
Transylvania
College
College
in
in
Romania,
Romania, Florentina also from Romania, Maria from Romania, New Horizons Foundation, and also, well, they represent their organizations, and then there are other organizations I'm also going to mention, and also those that support all of us. If you allow me, they are my children and my husband. I would like to thank them particularly, not for being here today, I love it, but for supporting me throughout the process. Because these processes, these networking processes, are not work, and I don't need to explain this to you. You represent lots of networks from your countries, your regions, your municipalities, and it's not easy. And this story is precisely telling you that it's not easy, but that it's worthwhile. It's a different publication, different to other publications we've made at CLAYSS, because it doesn't share service learning experience. It's not an academic publication. It's a management story because it's a very hard working process, very difficult. It requires energy, time, head, heart, but it's possible and it's worth it. That's why we thought it was worthwhile closing this project with a publication, with a report that accounts for that hope and that talks about the bridges that it's worth building. So, here you have the English version, Story of a Network Weaving Experience. It's going to be also in Spanish very soon. It's a publication about this program for the promotion of service learning in educational institutions and NGOs in Central and Eastern Europe. This is a program that we started in CLAYSS in late 2015, early 2016, that will be completed very soon. The main objective was to generate a critical mass to promote service learning in the region that could then sustain this process, which is a reality today thanks to the service learning network in Central and Eastern Europe. All the experiences conducted over the years were co-designed with these actors in a process we built together. But this process is impossible to be thought of in advance. When we were thinking with Alejandra and many discussions with Candelaria as well, how can we explain this process beyond the actions? So we organized a training, then a publication. We argued. They didn't want it. They did want it. We didn't want it. We were in good terms. We did not. All these ups and downs. How can we tell this story then? What underlies that story? Not how many people we trained, what we're really doing in terms of transformation. And so Alejandra proposed this double figure here that on the one hand shows the creation, the development of networks and the development of installed capacities. And on the other hand, we have the projects we work on together and all the emerging projects, programs, or activities that we didn't know what was going to happen, but that happened thanks to the experiences that we weaved together. So, as Maria Rosa mentioned, this the look of the other. At CLAYSS, we understood that looking at the other is not just a question of humanity, it's a work strategy, looking at the other, building with the other, listening attentively, accepting or modifying what I thought before in order to build together. That is not just what we do because we are good people. It's what allows us to work and build and weave networks that promote and sustain service learning in the different places we work at. So, the strategy we have for the systemic change, I was talking to you about a helix, but I was not showing you the helix. This is what I meant. That's a helix. I mentioned that figure. So this building with the others, the recipients of the activities, we understand those are agents in the process, not just recipients. These activities that we conduct are not just a list of things to be done, saying, okay, as many people came to the training, they downloaded, as many people downloaded the book. This is what allows us to check this transformation that we're looking for, the generation of this critical mass. What we did, what Alejandra was able to do by helping us read this story, this path, from an academic perspective and from a networking process. This is based on the concepts that you can read on the right from Sen, Nussbaum, the UNDP, CODAM, but what we did was to read the experience with the assistance of the theory that would allow us to understand what things worked, what did not, and why they did or did not. So we um,
que nos
made this
permitía
graph
hablar de la creación
that
de
allowed
valor
us to talk
que tiene
about
este
the
programa
value
o tipo de
creation in this
programa.
program.
Entendemos que hay
We
distintos
understand
tipos
that
de
there are
valor
different
que
kinds of
suceden en este
value that
proceso
happen in this
y que
process,
son
in that
y que permiten
they
un crecimiento
allow
y
us to
permiten la
grow and allow
instalación
us
del tema
to
de la región y el
set up the
fortalecimiento del
topic in
tema
the
de la
region
región.
and strengthen the topic in the region.
Entonces,
So
cuando hay un propósito
when there's
compartido,
a shared
decimos
purpose,
en esta
we say in the
publicación, la
publication,
vinculación y el
the
trabajo en
connection
red
and the
tiene un valor estratégico.
network
Decía
have a
antes,
strategic
no es
value, as I said
solamente
before. It's not
porque es
just
interesante
because
conocer
it's
gente o
interesting
porque
to
todos
get
nos
to know
enriquecemos.
people or
Es
because
nuestra herramienta de trabajo. Y por
this
eso es
is
que
rich
cuando
for us.
nos
It's
reunimos
our
acá,
tool work. It's
las
our
500
working
personas
tool.
que nos reunimos
And
acá
here, the
en el
500 people
colectivo,
that got
y
here
cuando
together this
promovemos
morning, when we
encontrarnos, y
promote these
cuando nos
meetings,
llamamos, y todo esto
when we
es parte de
call one
nuestro
another, that's
trabajo,
part of our
porque nuestro
job,
trabajo es
because
transformar el
our
mundo.
job is to
No
transform
es
the
intervenir en
world.
lo que se
It's
pueda.
not to
Es
act
transformar
upon
el
two
mundo,
schools, it's to
transformar nuestro
transform the
colectivo,
world, to
y eso son
transform
nuestras
educational
estrategias.
systems, and these are our strategies.
Vincularse y conectarse generando
Connecting
fraternidad
by
es en
generating
definitiva la
fraternity
forma más
is
sostenible de
finally the
promover el
most
aprendizaje de
sustainable way
servicios,
of promoting
fortalecer las
service
políticas
learning,
públicas relacionadas con
strengthening
eso
public
y apoyar
policies
las
related to
estrategias a
that,
largo
and
plazo.
supporting long-term
Acá
strategies.
incluyo el nombre de
Here
todas
I
las
include the
organizaciones
names
que
of all
forman
the
parte de la
organizations that
red
are now part of
de
the
aprendizaje
network
y servicio de
of
Europa
service
Central y del
learning in
Este.
Central and Eastern Europe.
Desde ya estamos
Of
abiertos
course,
a sumar
we are
más
open
y
to
desde ya hay
adding
muchas
more
otras que
members,
no
and there are
forman
many
parte
others that are not part
de este grupo
of this
central, pero con las
central
que hemos
group,
trabajado
but
también.
we've
Allá
been
está
working with
Bojana, por
them. We have
ejemplo, de Croacia,
Bojana
con
there
quien
from
hemos colaborado muchas
Croatia. We have
veces.
worked with her a lot of
Hace poco
times.
empezamos a
Recently,
intercambiar
we
y
started
colaborar con el
exchanging and
hub de Europa
collaborating
del
with
Este
the
de
Eastern
Universitate.
Europe hub
De
of
nuevo, en esta
Universitate.
vocación
So
de
again,
conexión y
in
de
this
construcción
vocation of
conjunta,
connecting and of building
estamos
jointly,
abiertos
we are
siempre a
always
aprender y
open
saber
to
más.
learning and knowing more.
Y queríamos compartirlo
And
porque
we
en
wanted to
realidad,
share
más
this
allá de la
because
especificidad
actually,
de
beyond the
esta red y de este
specificity of this
proceso que
network and
generamos
of
en
this
Europa Central
process
y
that
del
we
Este,
generated in
esta
Central
es
and
una
Eastern Europe,
manera de
this is
entender
the
el
way of
trabajo que tenemos en
understanding
CLAYSS.
the
Cuando
work we
nosotros
do at
decimos
CLAYSS.
que en
When
CLAYSS
we say that at
capacitamos, que en
CLAYSS we
CLAYSS
train,
publicamos, que
we
en CLAYSS
publish,
investigamos, y
we
una de esas
research, we do
estrategias
research,
y
and
esa
one of those
conexión, ese
strategies
trabajo en
is
redes,
the
tiene que ver con
working
este
as a
espíritu
network
que
that has to do with
compartimos.
the spirit
Acá
I
quise
was sharing.
incluir, no quise
Here,
cerrar, digamos,
I didn't
mi
want to finish my
presentación
presentation
sin mostrar
without
este mapa que está en
showing you
nuestra,
this
parte de
map.
nuestra página web, que
It is in
seguramente
a
muchos de
web
ustedes lo hayan
page. I'm
visto,
sure you
y
have
aunque no lo
seen
hayan
it.
visto,
And if
muchos de
you
ustedes
haven't,
forman parte
many
de
of
esta
you are
red.
part of these
Forman,
networks.
han sido, tienen que ser
I mean,
impulsados o forman
you have
parte de su
promoted them or
sostén.
you
Y hay
are
varias otras
members of
redes
it.
que
And
están
there are
en
many other
formación,
networks
algunas
that are being formed.
ayer en la
Yesterday,
reunión de
for
la Red
instance, at
Iberoamericana de
the
Aprendizaje y
Ibero-American
Servicio, por ejemplo,
Network of
estuvimos
Service
hablando
Learning
con
meeting, we were
algunas
talking
redes
with some
incipientes.
networks that are just
Nuestra
starting.
invitación es
Our
a
invitation
colaborar,
is
a
to
crecer
collaborate,
juntos,
to
a
grow
compartir,
together,
a compartir
to
experiencias
share
también, porque lo que nos
experiences and
pasa cuando
exchange experience
trabajamos
as well.
así
Because what happens when
es
we
que
work like
tenemos
this
mucho para
is that we
ofrecer
have a
a
lot
otros que
to
también
offer
están y
to
tenemos mucho
others
para
that are
aprender de
beginning,
otros.
and we have a lot to learn from other networks.
Creo que eso es todo.
I think
Agradecer
that's
a
it.
todos los que,
Thank you so
todos
much
los
to
que
all
vienen
those
participando
that
del
have been
proceso,
participating in the process.
animarlos
I want
a
to
construir y a
encourage
hacer
you
nuestro
to build and to
Gracias.
leave a record of these processes. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Luz.
Thank you, Luz, for your
Presentación.
presentation.
Para dar continuidad al panel,
In order to
vamos a
continue with the panel,
cambiar los cartelitos.
we'll switch name tags.
Móviles o una guía que vaya pasando la computadora. Vamos a dar continuidad al panel escuchando
And
ahora a
now we will give the floor to Pablo Wuhan,
que
my
va
dear
a
friend
comenzar a
Pablo,
desarrollar otra
and
línea
he
de
will
producción
talk
de estos últimos
about
años que tiene que ver con la investigación.
something related to
Pablo nos va a
research.
presentar
Pablo will
la
present
investigación
the
desarrollada en el
research
programa de artes,
conducted by
aprendizaje servicio solidario en las
the
artes,
service
y sus
learning
efectos
in the
en las
arts and its
instituciones
effects
educativas.
on education
Aproximaciones
institutions.
a partir de la puesta en marcha de
Approaches
proyectos
based
en
on the
instituciones
implementation of
educativas
projects
argentinas de
in
nivel medio y
Argentine
superior.
institutions
Avances en
at
educación en artes.
mid and higher education institutions. Pablo
Es
Bujan.
diseñador
He is
de imagen y
a
sonido.
designer
Desde
of
2012
image
se
and
encarga de la
sound.
producción de materiales
He is
audiovisuales en CLAYSS
responsible
y
for
desde
audiovisual
2017 coordina
material at
programas de apoyo a
CLAYSS,
instituciones
and he
educativas federales,
supports
aprendizaje y servicio en las artes.
education
Desde
in
2000
the
a
arts.
2017 trabaja
From
en el
2000 to
Programa Nacional de
2017, he
Educación
has
Solidaria del
worked in the
Ministerio de
national
Educación de la Nación
program on
Argentina,
service learning from the
realizando
National
materiales de
Ministry of
capacitación
Argentina,
docente y divulgación del aprendizaje y servicio
disseminating
en
service
diferentes
learning
formatos.
in different
Publicaciones,
formats,
páginas web del programa
publications,
y
web
boletín electrónico,
pages, and
marketing institucional
electronic
y videos
newsletters, as well as
sobre
videos
experiencias educativas en
on
Buenos.
solidarity education experiences.
Hola, buenas a todos.
Good
Gracias.
afternoon, thank you.
Sí, parece que tengo
I think I have fans over there. Thank you.
Bueno, primero,
First
antes
of all,
de contarles un
before
poco de qué se
telling
trata
you
el trabajo que venimos
what
haciendo en
this
investigación,
work is
quisiera hacer una
about, I
mención
would
muy
like
breve
to
sobre lo que es el
mention
programa de
very
apoyo a
briefly
instituciones
the
educativas
program
federales,
that
aprendizaje, servicios y
supports
las artes.
institutions
Coordino,
on service
junto a
learning in the arts,
Pontificia,
coordinated
está
together with Marta
aquí,
Urquiza, who's somewhere
está.
over there.
En CLAYSS,
At CLAYSS,
conseguimos en nuestro programa de
in
apoyo
our
una
support
estrategia
program,
integral de
one of
acompañamiento
the
a las
strategies
instituciones educativas y a todos los actores
is
que
to
están
support
involucrados en ellas,
education and all stakeholders involved in them
y educación artística.
in the arts. So today, to this date, we have trained over 3,500 people, including principals, teachers, and students, as well as community stakeholders. We have supported 42 institutions in Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, and Peru, and over 250,000 people have benefited from these service learning projects in the arts. Generally speaking, we say that this support program lasts 1 year, and in many cases this ends up being a 2-year project. From the beginning, one of the objectives of the program was to build evidence and experience on how to promote service learning as part of artistic education in the formal education system. At the end of our second year in 2019, we realized that a way of meeting this objective was to conduct a research to deepen on what had been realized during the years in which we have worked with the institutions. The artistic experiences implemented on these service learning projects produce a change in the bond with the protagonists as well as with the communities where these projects are implemented. Therefore, for us, it was an opportunity to evaluate the impact of these service learning projects in the arts have on the learning of the students. The objective of our research was to generate evidence regarding service learning in the improvement of the general education of people. Thanks to donors and Mateo and Alejandra, we were able to build a 3-year plan. I will explain the first year. This started in 2020, and due to the pandemic and to other issues, we started implementing it last year. Like Luz was saying, I'm speaking about this research, but this research is the result of a team, a huge team, formed by Dr. María Alejandra Herrero, Professor Diego Manrique, Daniel Giorgetti, hi Ale, Liliana Meyer, Wanda Peroso, and Sofia Serafini. Diego was over there, I think. Hi, Diego. Thank you, Pablo. Thank you. Yeah, we need to bring fans here. For several reasons, which I won't mention, we decided to start our first year by gathering a sample of the institutions from 2017 to 2019. This sample included institutions, education institutions, primary and secondary institutions, art institutions, higher education institutions, and universities. We decided to pick only institutions from Argentina for this first year. For the second year, that will start soon, or we will work with institutions with whom we worked in 2021, and we will research and work with institutions not only from Argentina but also with institutions from Brazil, Colombia, and Peru that are present here in this room today. Oh, I hope. I was expecting a round of applause from them. You disappointed me. This research included two stages, a quantitative stage and a qualitative stage. In the quantitative stage, we conducted online surveys with self-administered questionnaires and was addressed to all institutions. The qualitative stage included specific interviews to principals, teachers, and students from 8 institutions. The purpose was to interview not only what we call success stories, but also institutions where support needed some adjustments. Considering all this work, we can mention some conclusions based on 3 pillars connected to the artistic knowledge and their relation to service learning, in relation to educational practices related to the project and their connection to the community, and on the role of students in service learning project focused on arts, protagonism, and roles. In this first year, we realized that teachers that were part of the project were mainly trained in visual arts and music, followed by dance and writing. We realized that at least during this first year and in these institutions there were no teachers who had training on design and drama. We realized that the projects address different pillars present in the curricula, both in higher education and mandatory education. Over 7 categories were identified. 3 can be mentioned as music, several languages, and community art. One of the things that we identified today and in previous seminars is the collective or individual action, both in higher education and mandatory education. All responses mention that these projects are focused on collective action. These responses evidenced the relation between community work and the collective way of implementing it. On the other hand, experiences and artistic experiences in Argentina and Latin America occupy different places according to the teachers interviewed in these institutions. 71% of the respondents recognized that the experiences played an essential role during the project. So there is a strong relevance in terms of giving a new value of artistic skills in local culture, but connected to solidarity. I wanted to mention briefly the secondary education institutions. These solidarity projects included cross-sectional education processes apart from the artistic projects that resulted. teachers had to rethink the curricula and the connection in order to achieve pedagogic complementarity. This produces collaborative ways of working among teachers and subjects. Likewise, for students, projects translated into participation experiences based on the different stages according to the development of the projects.
En el desarrollo de estas experiencias
When we developed these solidarity experiences,
generaron
we
contribuciones en
realized
cuanto
that they
a
contributed
el aprendizaje
in
significativo
terms
de los
of the
estudiantes.
significant
Esto
learning of
redundó en el
students. This
fortalecimiento
produced a
de
strengthening
conocimientos transversales
of cross-sectional
interdisciplinarios,
and
como vimos
interdisciplinary
hace un
knowledge,
rato,
like we
y
saw
esto ocurrió en
earlier.
todas las
And this
instituciones en las que
occurred
fue
in
desarrollado,
all
ya que
institutions
lograron
since
articular al menos
they were
dos
able to
asignaturas
articulate at least two
alternantes entre dos o
subjects
tres áreas de
and
conocimiento
2 or
de
3
los procesos
subject or
investigadores.
knowledge areas.
Esto se tradujo en fortalecimiento
This
del trabajo en
resulting
equipo
in
entre
a
docentes
stronger
y en las funciones
teamwork
pedagógicas
among
articuladas
teachers
para lograr
and
plasmar
so as
modificaciones,
to implement
reivindicaciones y sobre todo
changes
el abordaje
and
y la
to
metodología del aprendizaje de servicio
address
solidario de
service
cara al desarrollo
learning
de los procesos didácticos
to help
estudiantes
develop didactic processes of
Desde ya,
students.
estas
Undoubtedly,
articulaciones
these
ciertamente
connections that
visibilizan
make visible
aportes en el trabajo
the
colectivo entre docentes.
contribution
También se vieron
among
atravesadas
teachers
por
were also
dificultades
affected by
relacionadas con los
difficulties
modos
connected
en que
to
los proyectos
the
se fueron
ways in which the
organizando en las
projects
culturas institucionales
were
de ambas
implemented in the
instituciones.
different cultures of the
En lo que
different
refiere
institutions.
a los
As
aportes
regards the
del modo de trabajo
contributions
colectivo con y entre los estudiantes
from this collective work among students,
podemos señalar
we can
valoraciones
mention
vinculadas con la formación
the
aprendizajes
significant
generados
learnings
a partir de su
produced
participación en
based
experiencias
on
educativas.
the solidarity
Pudimos apreciar
experiences
en
in
los
which
relatos
they
de los docentes
participated. From the
entrevistados
respondents,
en
we were
las
able
entrevistas que llevamos adelante,
to
las ventajas del
identify
trabajo
the
pedagógico
advantages
con
of the
enfoque
pedagogic
solidario,
work focused on service learning. So, and this enables students to generate or to learn on projects in which included articulated content resignifying art as a learning experience focused on solidarity. The changes and transformations of the students who participated evidenced their involvement, how the different roles were implemented, and their learning experiences. The values or the appreciations of the teachers were very positive in terms of artistic learning. The teamwork was a collective learning where not only the success of solidarity actions are at stake, but students have to generate networks among themselves and involve themselves with learning and play different roles. There's the importance of flexibility by assuming roles that characterize shared experiences in solidarity projects, reflection in different community contexts. Solidarity actions for these groups included bonding mechanisms and strengthening of friendship, as well as revaluing local culture. We also have to mention the importance of these projects in the choice of future learning from a labor perspective or from a university education. When we signify values such as solidarity, sense of belonging, teamwork, exchange with community, and acknowledging others were key pillars in the teacher's reflections in terms of these experiences that enable the involvement of students in the development of the projects. The solidarity in the stories of students and teachers visibilized that these experiences were considered as part of the institutionalization of comprehensive projects that promote and transform artistic experiences. Regarding higher education, the projects that we supported and with which
ver en
we
profundidad el
worked
primer año
during the first year,
de la investigación, salvo en un caso,
except in one
eran
case
iniciativas
were
que todas
initiatives
tenían por lo menos 10
that
años de
at least
trayectoria
had
como
existed
mínimo.
for 10 years.
Esto nos permitió ver
This
que si
helped
bien
us
en sus
identify that
en
even
sus
though
comienzos fueron
they
proyectos
were
embrionarios de aprendizaje servicio
projects
solidario,
for
que
service
no se
learning at
enmarcaban o
very
no
early
tenían
stages,
docentes
who didn't
capacitados
have
en este
any
momento de aprendizaje de
skilled
servicio, a
teachers,
través de los años
throughout
y
the
de la
years,
trayectoria de estos
and
proyectos pudieron construir y lograr una
they were
planificación
able to
cuidada y
achieve
tuvieron alumnos
planning,
que si bien
and
trabajaban
students, even though
activamente
were
en
working
proyectos,
actively on this
no
project,
tanto participaban en su planificación
didn't
o
participate
evaluación.
from planning or
Al
evaluation.
revés, el proyecto que tenía
The
menor
project
trayectoria
that was
de
not
los que estuvimos evaluando
as
se marcó desde un
old,
principio en la
right from
pedagogía
the
del
beginning,
solidario y con las mismas características del
used
proyecto,
this
sus
service
alumnos
learning
participaban
pedagogy, and
su
their
planificación
students
y en su
participated
evaluación.
in planning
En
and
todos los casos,
evaluation. In all the cases,
podemos ver la vinculación
we
del
can see a
participio
connection
comunitario,
between
una difusión
art
y
and
un intercambio
community.
del retroartístico
There
en
is
diversos
an
contextos,
exchange
no
in different
como espacio de
contexts.
vida. También en términos de formación
So in
profesional de
terms
los
of
artistas,
professional
pudimos ver que todos
training, we
estos
were
proyectos
able to see
tenían
that
un
all these
peso
projects
importante.
were very significant.
Muy cerca. Pudimos ver, por último,
Finally, we
que
were able to
los
identify
proyectos
that all these
tuvieron un impacto
projects
efectivo
had
en
an
los
effective
aprendizajes y en la
impact on
formación de los
learnings and on
estudiantes,
professional
un impacto
training,
efectivo y
an
emocional
effective and
en quienes
emotional
participaban, al igual
impact
que
on
vimos
those who
esto en los proyectos
participated.
de educación obligatoria, los estudiantes y quienes resultan destinatarios del mismo.
In
Así
students
como un
and
cambio
beneficiaries,
en la vida de las
and
personas
they also produced a change in
involucradas.
the lives of the people involved.
Nosotros, al comenzar a
When
planificar la
we started
investigación,
planning
nos
this
planteamos una
research,
hipótesis, un
our
caso muy
hypothesis was very ambitious,
que esperamos poder llevar a
and
buen
we
puerto,
hope
que
to
la
prove
residencia de
it.
servicio
That,
solidario en
and
las
this is that
artes
service
tiene un
learning in
enfoque
arts
que renueva
includes
el
an
paradigma de la
approach
educación
that
artística
renews the
en América
paradigm
Latina,
of
favorece y
artistic
alimenta la mejora de los
teaching and
aprendizajes,
favors
impacta
learning and
significativamente en las comunidades
produces a
en
positive
contextos
impact in the
se
communities
realizan.
where these
Como
projects are
evidencia de este primer
implemented.
año de
As
trabajo,
evidence of this
podemos
first
observar
year, we
que
can
el
observe that
servicio
service
solidario
learning as a pedagogic
para abordar
proposal
el área de
to
artes
address the
favorece la
arts
inclusión en el
favors
conocimiento,
inclusion,
desplaza el eje de la enseñanza y vincula
displaces
los conocimientos
the
artísticos
axis of
con las
teaching, and connects
significaciones
arts
actuales, es decir, las prácticas artísticas
to
colectivas populares
art.
relacionadas con lo contemporáneo y lo latinoamericano, vinculando
Therefore,
estrechamente las
connecting
experiencias
the
artísticas
artistic
con la comunidad.
experiences with the
La verdad que con
community.
esta
So with this presentation, we tried to summarize very briefly what we've been doing all this year. This is part of a first stage, and this year and next year, like I said, we will keep on investigating on art as an object of knowledge affected by service learning, and we hope to see the impact of these projects in the community. So we hope to tell you our evolution during the next years.
Bien. Para ir finalizando.
Okay, so now to conclude this panel, I'm going to pass the floor to Marianela Fernandez Villa, who is going to present on the research process in the program for the promotion of service learning in Uruguay with the two pieces of research that were conducted there. Marianela has a master's degree in communication, social change and development from the Complutense University of Madrid. She has a degree in sciences of communication, a degree in sociology by the Catholic University of Uruguay. She has a graduate degree in public policies and the rights of childhood and adolescence, and community mediation and peaceful conflict resolution. She was an advisor in communication at the board of directors of the Child and Adolescent Institute in Uruguay. She was a member and consultant in communication at the National Institution of Human Rights and the Public Defenders of Uruguay, and she was the director of communications at the first Public Defender's Office of Montevideo. She was part of the organizational communications chair at the School of Information and Communication as members of communication team in the area. She was part of the research team on communication, governance, and public policies in a project between Ciudad and the National University of La Plata. She was a teacher at the Master's course on Communication and Culture.
Es investigadora, consultora,
She's a consultant member and facilitator on organizational development and strategic planning on communication. She has drafted reports, publications, and presentations on the topic in national and international areas. And currently, she is a coordinator of the CLAYSS office in Uruguay. So, Marianela, you have the floor. Thank you. What a moment being seated here at this podium with Ale, that is also the coordinator at the office. So I'd like to share very briefly a summary of two pieces of research that we have conducted in Uruguay and Argentina. And I'm going to try and trace, that's why it's called service learning as a traceable proposal. I'm going to try and trace a line, mark a line between these two researches. First, I wanted to share a quote by Zelmira May, the coordinator and specialist in the education program at the UNESCO Office for Latin America. She's going to be here tomorrow presenting with us. She said this in the latest meeting of the Uruguayan service learning conference. She said, how interesting it is, she said, when you work in an international organization that establishes guidelines and reports, how interesting it is to see organizations like CLAYSS that prove that this is possible and show through stories and specific facts that what we write about actually happens. So I'm interested in introducing this concept of traceability because based on the definition of this concept, it says that traceability means the possibility of identifying an origin, a trajectory, and a destination with a clear purpose. What happens in Uruguay with this idea of traceability? In the two pieces of research that we conducted, we tried to draw that line between analysis, the analysis of the effects of the integration of service learning in educational centers, and the relationship between those effects and the public policies and the possibility of contributing to the design of the public policy in Uruguay. We are in a very favorable context because we are in the redesign of the curricula and in the reform of the education. So this research is very relevant. It was a perfect timing. So the first research was led by Daniel Giorgetti. He's there at the back. He wants to give his low profile. Daniel Giorgetti and Javier Lacida. Javier Lacida, yes, a round of applause for them. Come on, stand up. Javier Lacida, after being our lead investigator with Daniel, he led the Institute of Educational Evaluation. He's the president now of the institute. They evaluate educational policies in Uruguay. So it was a great success by CLAYSS and Nieves particularly, who defined that Javier should be the one. And they worked with Felipe Miguez, a researcher that was the second investigator in the previous research. I'm going to tell you very briefly, we're going to start with the investigation focused on educational centers. Its purpose was to identify the contributions of the service learning pedagogy to the quality and inclusion of the educational proposal at the centers. Why quality and inclusion? This was another big hit because when the research is at the service not only of knowledge, of added aggregated knowledge, but also on the advocacy on public policies, when that is done correctly, it can be an interesting addition to the negotiation. In this first research, both Felipe and Luciano Tari defined that the variables of analysis will be quality and inclusion. These two variables are part of the national educational program in Uruguay, so they are a part of the redesign of the public educational policy. So when CLAYSS defines that the design of the research will contain these two categories, we start having a direct dialogue with the national education program. How is a dialogue? The researchers define that service learning, based on previous research, as an extensive study was conducted, promotes these two categories, quality and inclusion. And what happens at the centers? We have to find out how this permeates in the center and the students and the classroom as a learning space. Therefore, the students basically what they did was to define the concepts of quality, inclusion, and cross those two categories in these three scenarios. What happens with quality and inclusion and the students, what happens at the centers and at the institutions. That's the model of analysis. It's a very simple model with a lot of power because it refers to two categories that are now being reformulated in our country. I'm not going to spoil the research, it's going to be published soon. You will be able to read it, but there's some analysis that has to do with crossing these categories with teachers, directors, and the students, strengthen this concept that service learning strengthens quality and inclusion in the sense that it allows the quality and inclusion that is beginning in a center to put it at stake. It develops in the case of the centers that still do not have quality and inclusion integrated, develop these capabilities, and it complements in the case of those centers that have been working on this and that want to improve it even more. So there are many aspects where service learning effectively collaborates in these two categories. And there, in the research, you have some conceptual developments as to why it complements, why it strengthens, and why it develops. I'm going to skip this. So what does this research gives us focused on educational centers? In the case of Uruguay and Latin America, it gives us a starting point to generate research of cases in Uruguay so that they're integrated to those already conducted in other countries. This is the first time that Uruguay is doing research on these topics, so it's a very interesting baseline for us that can then be replicated in other countries. And it identifies and suggests potential ways of advocating for service learning pedagogy in quality and inclusion. And Felipe and Lucia finished this investigation, and we crossed the National Educational Plan of Uruguay with the service learning proposals. We matched them, and we saw that some educational goals might be achieved through what CLAYSS is doing in Uruguay. That's for another presentation. The second research, it has to do with it has focused on public policy. It's a comparative study between Uruguay and Argentina. Both countries, service learning has an impact on public policies from different places. In the case of Uruguay, as we know, it's a proposal that starts from public policy and then cascades over society. And in the case of Uruguay, as we are a civil society organization, our mission is to have an impact on public policy. The research led by Javier Giorgetti and Daniela Sida describes the process that led to the installation of service learning in both countries and compares the processes. What's interesting about this research is that it gives us a mapping of the possibilities of the service learning proposal based on the scenario it has to impact. If it's a proposal that comes from civil society, you can go through the Uruguayan chapter, but if it's an installed capability that is friendly with the government, you can know about the Argentinian experience. Three challenges in Uruguay and other countries as to how service learning can contribute to educational policy. First, the researchers say that it's an effective experience to reform the curricula with decision makers and centers. So the researchers take the proposal of the project-based learning and it proposes service learning as a differential and as a pedagogy that goes beyond project-based learning, and it connects with the community. So it's a dialogue with the educational policy. It's a very interesting line because it's what we try to generate in Uruguay is a stronger contact with the community. Second, it's an experience that is exciting. It generates local capabilities. This has been investigated, but in Uruguay we have evidence that it happens. And third, it builds richer relationships between school and community. We have clear evidence of this in Uruguay. And just two more things. Rebuild this idea of research as a common line in the political dialogue. The research in Uruguay meant that we had the similar language to have a dialogue with actors that are designing the public policy, both from the government and from civil society, and in some cases from businesses and from corporations. We have had discussions with some foundations that are working on this in Uruguay in the post-pandemic and in a social crisis that we are having now in Uruguay. So we're having conversations about that. And this is interesting. When we presented the research, we invited Adriana Aristimuño, that at the time was an advisor to the future administration, and she said, this research is about a success story of the strong incidence that civil society has on public policies. In our regions, that impact is not that strong. And now Adriana Aristimuño is the director of educational policies in Uruguay. So now we are having talks with her about how to incorporate service learning further in our curricular proposal. And second, also as a common line, service learning is considered as a state policy, not a government policy that changes with the administrations. It's a state policy from previous administrations. This ability to go beyond political inclinations of the government is very interesting, not only for Uruguay, but for Latin America. Gonzalo Baroni said this before becoming the Director of Education at the Ministry of Education and Culture of Uruguay. So again, service learning as a traceable proposal and as a possible mechanism for dialogue to keep having an impact on educational policies.
Thank you, Marianela. It's 6 o'clock. So I think this panel has been great. I would like to thank you all for your presentations and for sharing the intellectual production of these 20 years. I would like to ask for a round of applause for those who presented and for their teams. Teams of specialists in service learning, education institutions, teachers, students, and community. Because along this journey, from the initial presentations of Elena, from gathering each word, Rosy mentioning focus on pedagogy, on service learning in the production of knowledge. Luz, who mentioned territorial management and territorial work. Pablo and Marianela, who took us through the impact of service learning on the impact and learning of students, so as to close this journey related to the effort and passion on service learning and impact on public policies. So it's been a great panel that goes from students' words to teachers. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all the audience. I would like to remind you that the publications that are already edited can be downloaded from the webpage. Those who are not will be soon on CLAYSS webpage. And with this, we would like to close. Thank you. So we would like to conclude the activities and would like to remind you that tomorrow we will begin at 9 a.m. We invite you to complete this assessment form from today's activities. Your feedback is very important on this 25th International Seminar. Thank you, and let's give a round of applause to the 400 attendants. Please, we had lots of views on our digital platforms, and please, before 9 a.m.,
merecido
here
descanso. Nos vemos
for the
mañana.
first panel. Have a great evening.